If the Braves trade one of Marcell Ozuna or Jorge Soler, who should it be? Christian and I debate that next. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, your home for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rao. Follow him on Twitter at Christian S. Rao. You can find all of our written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. You can follow the show most social media platforms. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and all of that. Welcome to, I'm going to call it Listener Friday. Today's show was suggested by a YouTube commenter. He said, what are the arguments, what are the cases for trading Marcell Ozuna and or trading Jorge Soler? Which one should the Braves do? So what we're going to do today, Christian is going to take one side. I am going to take the other. We are going to present the cases for trading that respective guy. We're going to rebut the cases from the other person on their trades. And then we are going to open this up to you over the weekend on our social media platforms. We are going to have polls. We want you to tell us who won the debate and which of these two players should move based on our arguments. We flipped a coin off air to figure out who gets who. Christian gets the case for trading Jorge Soler. I get the case for trading Marcell Ozuna. As Christian won the coin toss, he will go first. So without further ado, Christian, why should the Atlanta Braves this offseason move Jorge Soler?
Yeah, I won the coin toss. I elected to receive on this one. The reason that Jorge Soler should be moved, if we're going to pick between the two of these, has a lot to do with the opposite side of this one, Lindsay. The case is to more keep Marcell Ozuna. They're both receiving $16 million entering in 2025. Marcell Ozuna was an MVP candidate in the National League this year, even though he had a little bit of slumpingness, if you will, towards the end of the season. Soler has been great. Don't get me wrong, especially because of what we've seen from him after the trade. It wasn't much of a power aspect, but he got on base. And that's important. Cue all your Moneyball memes right here, Lindsay. What is important? He gets on base. That is huge. You need that, especially when there were injuries and a lot of lineup concerns with the construction of the lineup all season long. Soler really helped glue that, to help them get to the postseason. I don't think there's a postseason without Jorge Soler in 2024. I really don't. I think that trade was paramount for AA to do. I really do think that's the case. But let's be honest, Lindsay, there is absolutely no way the Braves make the postseason if it's not for Marcell Ozuna. Absolutely no way, shape, or form. So if just my initial start here, you cannot get rid of Marcell Ozuna after what you saw from him in 2024. That's why Soler takes the cake for me. And that's argument number one. Okay. Yeah. Argument number two in my case. Okay. You want to go ahead. Rebuttal, sir. Rebuttal.
No. Supporting document. This is not how debate should work. Supporting documentation, I guess, for your position here. For the season, the second highest on base percentage for any Atlanta Braves player without at bat minimums or anything like that. Jorge Soler, 356 on base was the second highest. Higher on base percentage than Ronald Acuna Jr., higher than Matt Olson, higher than the breakout Ramon Laureano, Austin Riley, all of those guys. Only guy he wasn't higher than? Marcell Ozuna at 378. I do think you make some good points about Marcell Ozuna's value to the team was so high. I'm going to get to that because I do think that's a better argument for me than it is for you. But I do think you're right that Jorge Soler did a lot for this team when he joined down the stretch from a power perspective. 37 hits, 20 of them are for extra bases, 9 home runs, 11 doubles. On base is good. I see that. What's your second point on this one?
My second point here is it ties into the first one because of you have Marcell Ozuna. Where do you put Soler in 2025, Lindsay? You get the return of Ronald Acuna Jr. Michael Harris obviously is going to be in the outfield as well. And then you have plenty of other pieces that can sit in the corner outfields. Jared Kelenic being one of them. There's just plenty of other pieces. Maybe Laureano stays. Oh, I hope he does, by the way.
Yeah.
And you don't want Soler to be out in a corner outfield spot because his defense is not great whatsoever. Both of these people we're talking about, and if you can look at it on our screen, we're talking about DHs because I think both of these are best suited for DH. We know that for a fact with Ozuna. He didn't play a single defensive inning, but Soler's defense is not much better. Not much better at all. If you can move on from Soler, send him to a team who absolutely needs a designated hitter. Maybe you can get another piece back that can help out in another more needed area. Maybe this can help with your shortstop position. Maybe, possibly. I'm sure you have to put a package deal in with him. But I think moving forward, Soler would be the right piece to move. Now, last little portion before I hand it over to you. If you look at both of these contracts, they both are getting $16 million this year going into 2025. Soler is 16 million this year and next year. So if you're stuck between a rock and a hard place and you don't know which one you should keep, the one that you should move on from, in my opinion, is the one you have longer control on because they're both aging. They're both aging superstars. I
Mhm.
don't want to have Soler on my team until he's in his age 35 season, if I can help it. I don't want to pay him $16 million. I want to be able to move him as fast as I possibly can to try and get some more youth going into this one, especially if I don't have a solid place for him to be on this starting lineup for 162 games. So that's where I'm sitting here. That's why Soler should be moved. I think you can still get some value from him. Not sure if it's enough value in comparison to the other person in this argument, but I do think that's the reason why you should move him.
Okay. Good points. Great points. I do want to take on, I think, the second thing and then the third. When you look at the defensive stats for Jorge Soler, you are right. He was not good defensively this year. He played 326 innings, -7 run value. I do think some of that, though, is because he had not touched the outfield grass in a game until he was traded, right? When you look at the last time he went into a season knowing he was going to play defense, 2022 with the Miami Marlins. We signed with them in free agency, and they said you're going to DH, but you're also going to play the outfield. 469 innings in left field. Nice performance, not anything amazing, 0 run value, but he was essentially neutral when he had an off season to prepare for playing defense. And in Miami, that is a big outfield, a big ballpark, right? He ended up looking into the specific details on this. He struggled moving to his back a little bit and moving to the line a little bit, which being a right-hander, he has to reach across his body to make a catch down the line. So I get that. He did add value with his arm, which is not necessarily something that we always expected. He actually was +1 in base running and then in arm strength and things like that. So he can add some. He can at least not hurt you theoretically if he has some time to work on his defense. I do think that was a big part of his struggles in right field this year. Although I'll admit it wasn't great. I do also think that the caveat there, like we talked about on the screen with moving DH, is most teams who acquire him aren't going to be looking at him as a outfielder. They're going to be looking at him as a DH. I don't know if that matters, but the fact that he can contribute a little bit in the outfield and he can help cover, I think is useful. Look at Marcell Ozuna. This is really an argument for the next segment. Look at Marcell Ozuna. Atlanta had so many outfield injuries, they never once put him on the grass. He has not touched the outfield grass in a game since game 3 of the 2023 season. They do not feel like he could add any sort of value and that all he will do is hurt in the outfield to the point of where they were willing to pick up a DFA Eddie Rosario and stick him in the lineup versus getting Marcell Ozuna out there. So I do think that Soler being able to give a little bit of defensive value probably helps your case over Ozuna. I think you made some good arguments. I do think you can't go wrong with trading Jorge Soler, provided that you can get a team to take on 2 seasons of that contract. There is probably going to be a little bit of concern about if he did, in fact, struggle offensively in Atlanta, or if they feel like he wasn't as impactful as he could have been in Atlanta, do they want to take on 2 years of his salary? But I do think it's some good points. I do think there's a better case, though, for trading Marcell Ozuna, and we'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby, Christian Rao. This is the Listener Friday. We are breaking down a listener suggestion of making the cases for trading Jorge Soler, trading Marcell Ozuna. Christian, in the first segment, went into why you should trade Jorge Soler. Going from my rebuttals, air quotes here if you're on audio, I don't disagree with him. I just think that maybe you have bigger or better reasons to trade Marcell Ozuna. So, to recap Marcell Ozuna's season, right? Batted .302 with a .925 OPS, 39 home runs, 104 RBI. It's his second consecutive 100 RBI season. He also, noted speedster, stole a base. So we have to acknowledge he has that aspect of his game as well. That's obviously a joke. Marcell Ozuna's sprint speed is incredibly low. I do think part of the reason you should trade Marcell Ozuna over Jorge Soler is the fact that Marcell Ozuna's value right now, arguably, not only is the highest that it's been, but there's no way it's going to get higher. Almost every single offensive category, you look at StatCast, it is a ton of red. He was among the best in the league at almost everything. Barrel percentage, 96 percentile. Hard hit percentage, 96 percentile. Sweet spot percentage, 96 percentile. Walks, 80th percentile. Yes, Soler was like 92nd percentile in walks, but a lot of his other stuff was lower than Ozuna's. Ozuna's value is not going to get higher. And there are a few things in the profile that could be a little bit concerning going forward. He did struggle with whiffs this year, 12th percentile, over a 30% whiff. It is I believe, a 6% jump from last year, 5%, 6% jump from last year. He's never been great at not whiffing, but that dropped significantly. His sprint speed was down to the 14th percentile. It was 28th last year, and it was 32nd percentile in 2022. And then that power outage that he had late in the year, he alluded to it being fatigue. He's 33 years old. He's the designated hitter. He's not playing defense. He's not running around the field. So for him to be dealing with fatigue, I know he didn't get a day off, but for him dealing with fatigue is a little bit concerning. And it makes you, as you enter his age 34 year, it honestly makes me a little bit worried that you're going to see a precipitous drop off in his performance. And so because of that, I have to wonder, do you get out from under that deal now versus waiting to see if he were to slump and you just play out the club option and let him walk? Do you deal with just poor defensive or poor offensive performances from him next year if for some reason he starts off slow and or can't keep it going next year?
That's a really good point, because if he does start off slow, there's not going to really be a market for him at the deadline, because he's an older veteran player that has no defensive experience, well, not experience, but no defensive. Just we don't want to put him there.
No defensive value.
And
Yeah.
value. Thank you. And then just the fact that he'll be a free agent after next season. That's a really good point about adding the potential of maybe moving Ozuna. I will say this though, and I'm going to go back to it one more point. If Ozuna was not on the Braves last year in 2024, this team would be probably really close to having a losing record, Lindsay. They would be really close to it. He was the glue of this team in 2024. Moving on from Ozuna after what he provided this squad, what sort of message would that send the clubhouse?
It is very difficult to separate the past performance from the future of the team. I'll acknowledge most, like Atlanta said, and he doesn't quite fall into this because he's on the final year of his deal. Atlanta has said they don't want to trade guys who have signed long-term with Atlanta. Now, This is the end of his deal, right? His final year of control. But in my mind, he still falls under that because he voluntarily signed for multiple years with Atlanta, right? He was a Silver Slugger, I think, in 2020. He came back and he signed a 4-year deal. This is the 5th-year club option on that. And so it's tough to do that. And I'm making the case against myself here. He is one of the leaders in the clubhouse. Multiple guys have talked about how he has come over, whether it's a hitting tip or just an emotional pickup. He's helped them. Michael Harris was in a slump last year when he came back from the injury. It's last year's 23, sorry. Slump in 23 after the injury. And he talked about how Marcell Ozuna turned his season around with a pep talk during a game against the Mets. Multiple guys have talked about him being a leader. So that is tough. Jorge Soler being newer in the clubhouse, newer on the team, I don't think necessarily has that leadership role yet. And it's easier to take him out of the clubhouse after he was only there for a couple months versus Ozuna, who's been a fixture on this team now for a few years. But I do think there's another aspect. We talked about future performance. I do think there's a future planning thing here, why it makes more sense to trade Ozuna than Soler. And it's because you don't necessarily have an immediate successor to Marcell Ozuna at DH if you trade Jorge Soler. Okay. I want to send folks back to 2022. Atlanta used 9 different players at designated hitter. Ozuna made 72 starts, right? He was the most commonly used DH. He also played in the outfield 52 times. But William Contreras played 31 at DH. Ronald Acuna Jr. played 27 at DH. Dickerson had 10. Eddie Rosario had 7. Orlando Arcia made 7 starts at DH. If you trade Jorge Soler, Marcell Ozuna has his final season. You either have to re-sign him into his age 35 year at more money when you've seen some of the physical stuff come up in this last season, the sprint speed getting low, things like that. But you don't have a ready-made replacement for him at DH because who would it be? Travis d'Arnaud? He's also on a club option and would be entering his age 36 year in 2026. He could walk as well. Probably more likely retire. And trading Ozuna instead of Soler means that for the next 2 seasons, barring injury, you know who your DH is going to be. You have that, and it gives you time to establish, is there some other young player in the organization that can be your DH as you ease them into a major league role? Drake Baldwin's a name that comes to mind. Obviously, Atlanta's hesitant to use their other catcher as the DH. I do think there is a conversation to be had about, can Sean Murphy get more playing time by not always being behind the plate, but DH as well? I do think you'd probably have to carry a third catcher if you did that just to be safe. But you don't have any ready-made successors in the organization to step into DH. And it is a competitive advantage to have a full-time slugger at DH versus having an extra outfielder or having a backup catcher or somebody taking at-bats in a game every day. So unless you're comfortable re-signing a 35-year-old Marcell Ozuna, having 2 seasons of certainty at DH to me is more valuable than just one, no matter how good Marcell Ozuna may have been, because we don't have a guarantee he will be that effective as he continues to be in that age-related decline.
The Ozuna conversation is fascinating to me. If you moved on from him, would you have to go and find, and I think you already answered that, but I'm still going to ask it anyways. Would you still have to go find a 40 caliber home run player to fill that spot in 2025 if you moved on from Ozuna? We saw him with 40 home runs in 2023. He had 39 in 2024. And then you mentioned 100 RBIs apiece. You're losing a lot of production if you're going to move on from him, regardless of age.
Jorge Soler in 2023 in Miami had 36 home runs and 75 RBI on a bad Miami team in a bad home ballpark for hitting home runs. I'm comfortable with the thought process that Jorge Soler can be that guy. And based on some of the comments from Alex Anthopoulos, they are as well. And Soler has the advantage of, if you have another incredibly injury riddled year, he can step in and at least be a body in the outfield, in a left field or something like that, for a game or two while you make a roster move, make a trade, whatever, for an outfielder, which is not something that they're obviously comfortable with Marcell Ozuna doing. He doesn't even practice in the outfield anymore. When he takes defensive drills, he takes defensive drills at first base, and they don't need him there with Matt Olson having not missed a game in 4 seasons.
Biggest, probably most serious question you're going to answer on this entire podcast, Lindsay. If you're willing to move on from Marcell Ozuna, are you also willing to move on from Snit Bear?
Oh man, Snit Bear's so great. There's no reason Snit Bear has to leave. What's he? Is he going to take it with him to Chicago or the Cubs or wherever he ends up going? I don't think he's going to take Snit Bear with him. I do think there is another. Braves fans don't like talking about this. There is another aspect to Marcell Ozuna being the one that gets traded over Soler, and it's the fact that Marcell Ozuna has multiple times been in legal trouble before, and he is he has apologized for what he's done. He has served his suspension from MLB and all of that stuff. But you are one incident from Marcell Ozuna having a significant suspension from MLB. If he does anything else, he is more than likely suspended for a long time by MLB. And as far as we know, Jorge Soler doesn't have that history of suspensions and things like that. And Ozuna has been, I'm not going to say a model citizen, but he has avoided any sort of legal trouble for the last, I want to say, 2 full seasons. And from all indications, he is a changed man. But you do have that concern as well. There's a little bit of an availability concern if he were to do anything. I wouldn't argue it's huge. It shouldn't be the reason you make the decision. But if nothing else, I think maybe that offsets the slightly higher injury concern you have with Jorge Soler, who has gone on the IL for back issues in the past. Braves fans don't like talking about that, but I do think that is relevant as well. Is Marcell Ozuna could potentially be facing some sort of league suspension if he were to have anything. He's not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Let's put it that way. The league is not going to give him the benefit of the doubt in anything. So
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
yeah. Any sort of final comments on this before we wrap it up? Both present the elevator pitch for our case and throw it to the listeners.
I would say this before I give the elevator pitch pushing towards Soler. Neither have to be traded. This is not a conversation to say
Right.
that one has to. There
Right.
is a valid roster moving forward where both can be on this squad. I just don't know
I
if it's a good idea to have
I
Soler in a corner outfield spot.
I think I did that show, was it early last week or 2 weeks ago? I did that show where I'm like, here's how you can do the outfield. You keep Soler, you bring back Laureano too, because somebody's going to get hurt and you're going to miss somebody. And so it gives you flexibility. And I do think you're right. There is a way to structure this outfield to have, or structure this lineup to have both of them back. This is from the listener request. Again, it's a listener Friday. If you have ideas for a show, by the way, tweet at me or at Christian or at the show. Drop it in the comments on YouTube. Go to our
Plenty of
Facebook
ways.
page, leave a comment there, something like that. But per their request, if you have to move one, it's trying to figure out which one it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And $16 million for me, spending $32 million on both of these players. If you're going to get production that you've seen from them in a full season, like you saw with Ozuna this year, and then what we've seen in the past from Jorge Soler, especially like 2021 when he went there, if you can get that production, good. Count me in for $32 million between the two of them. However, I can't justify $16 million for each. If you look at who's out there on the rest of the free agency, and I'm going to go back to, and I know we saw it in the comments that the majority of people are okay with our shortstop position right now, which is baffles me. But I think it's more important to spend that money elsewhere moving forward, especially since your outfield is already pretty solid of where it's at. Use that money, trade Jorge Soler, get him for maybe some prospects or whatever the case may be, or you can fix the piece right there in the trade. If not, use that money, spend it for a shortstop, spend it for something more pitching, more bullpen depth, whatever it needs to be. But I think AA can use that value elsewhere better for 2025. That is a huge reason why Soler should be moved this offseason.
All right.
Lindsay?
Yeah. My elevator pitch here for trading Marcell Ozuna is, unlike Soler, Ozuna's value is, one, it's higher right now. Two, it will never be higher. And it gives you the ability to mitigate some If you're worried about an age-related or a physical decline in Marcell Ozuna, again, he had fatigue issues at the end of the year. He admitted to that. It played a part in the power outage he put on in the month of August and September. And keeping Soler over over Ozuna gives you some continuity at the designated hitter position for the next couple years, because this is a team that likes to draw up the same lineup every single day. Being able to pencil in Soler for 2 years versus Ozuna for one and then having to figure it out is more valuable, I think, long term to the organization. But again, we want to hear from you. You can leave it in the comments down below. We're going to put a poll on YouTube in the community tab. We're going to put a poll on Facebook. We're going to put a poll on Twitter. We'll aggregate all of those votes up and we'll present the totals, I believe, probably on Monday's show, on our Mailbag Monday show. So come back for that. In the meantime, if you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. But also, if you would, leave us a 5-star review. That really does help us with the discovery thing. Once you hit 10 or 20 5-star reviews, it really starts pushing the show in the algorithm to Braves fans. So that would be great if you do that for us. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend, and we will see you on Monday on Braves Today.